These are my business antlers, Brad.
Of course, they're the ones with the sequins on them.
Yeah, look, they come out after Thanksgiving. They go away after New Year's. They are a way to signify that this is business season.
That's right.
On my Twitch stream.
You want the sparkly antlers. That's how they know you mean business.
Look, you can't see it on the Twitch stream, but there's also some holly there. It gets green screened out.
I don't know why it took me like 3 appearances of those antlers on one of these streams or these video chats before I realized, oh, wait, you just have those zip tied to your headphones.
Yeah, of course. But do you think I was putting them on every day?
I assumed you were just wearing them for funsies.
My head's too big to wear like a headband antler. It hurts.
I just figured you were coming from some child related activity and you didn't bother to take them off yet or something.
No, I was wearing I don't even know. I was wearing one of these orange skull dock workers hats. I don't know.
A beanie.
Beanie. Yeah.
I mean, well, I don't know about you. I mean, I would call it a toboggan, but that tendency has all but been beaten out of me by now.
Wait, no, toboggan has the puff on the top, doesn't it?
Does it? Well,
yeah.
I mean, if you recognize the word toboggan as referring to a hat, then you're already ahead of 99% of the Philistines in California.
Look, man, we don't need to talk about cold weather gear in California because it's just going to piss off all the locals.
That's true.
I continue to be irked when it's like 45 degrees out and I see people walking around with like wool mittens and like a huge scarf and like a big giant toboggan. I'm like, man, I've lived here for 20 years, but you all assholes.
They've got the hood like with the drawstrings so that you can only see their nose. Yes.
Yeah. It's like you don't know when it's barely freezing ish. You don't have to worry about freezing your lungs. You can breathe through your mouth still. It's okay.
That's true.
And when I was in Chicago a couple of winters ago, I was there in January and it was -20 before the wind chill.
Wow.
And I thought I had experienced cold in my life before, but I had not.
Yeah.
Like when you got into the car, you had to scrape the inside of the windshield because the condensation, like the moisture from your breath the last time you were in the car would frost up on the inside of the glass. And that was horrific. People shouldn't live there. It's no bueno.
I don't think I've ever experienced cold of that magnitude before. That's like, I don't even know what that would feel like.
So my mom said that we had, when you and I were both kids and we lived close to each other without knowing it. Mom said that there was one year that it got to -20 in Bristol. And we had like metal frame sliding glass doors around, like that was all the doors on our house. There was one door that wasn't a metal frame sliding glass door. And it was so cold that the moisture that was condensing on the inside of those doors where the metal was leaching heat out, froze the doors shut. And so the only way we could get out of the house was to go through the one door that was just a normal ass door. Or we had to warm up those edges. We hair dried them and then the power went out. We were like, oh shit, we're going to die in here.
Yep. That'll happen.
Yeah, rural life, man. It's good.
Yeah, it's good. I agree with you. That is good. Does it ever feel like a little dizzying, or maybe do you feel like a little sense of vertigo every time you brush up against the extremely narrow range of conditions in which human beings can actually live? You know what I mean? It's like all it took was for the temperature to drop like an extra 30, 40 degrees more than it normally might. And all of a sudden, like the basic functioning of your house is breaking down. You know what I mean? Or like, another good example of that is like the boiling point of water based on the atmospheric pressure.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Like you can't make tea on Mount Everest.
Right. Totally. Like
it just doesn't work.
Who would want to go on Mount Everest if you can't make tea? But you know what I mean? Or it's like, human can't exist in a vacuum because all of the liquid in your body will just boil right out. You know what I mean? There's a lot you take for granted about living on this planet in most of the habitable climates that you do.
Like even in the climates where life can exist on the planet, which is like, it's shocking, right? Like there's briny lakes underneath Antarctica that are full of like weird microbes and shit that only exist in one particular briny lake under Antarctica. There's the stuff that lives at the bottom of deep sea trenches. There's the stuff that lives on Mount Everest. There's the stuff that lives in volcanic vents. There's, all this. It's amazing and humbling. And it makes, like, when you think about that stuff, it's when I feel the smallest, right?
Sure.
Well,
yes.
That's not true. After last week's talk about black holes, pretty small.
That's fair.
Or I guess that was the patron episode. But anyway, yes, I feel very small when I think about how how narrow a slice of things we can live in.
I mean, when it comes down to it, I would rather live in Chicago than a black hole, if you put it to me. So at least there's that.
At least love can reach you in a black hole, Brad. But in
true.
Chicago,
That's
I
fair.
don't know.
That's a good point.
Nice hot dogs, though. Welcome to Brad and Will Made a Tech Pod. I'm Will.
I'm Brad. Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
That's good. Well,
Yeah. You gonna get business antlers? What are you gonna fancy up your hat? I can tell you how I do the zip ties.
Okay. Well, let me figure out my antler or other headgear situation.
Okay.
Because there's as discussed, there's elf ears, there's Santa hats, there's
Get sexy elf ears.
I don't know about what kind of elves.
You can get a whole new audience. You find Brad over on OnlyFans.
I don't know what kind of elfin audience you're catering to, but
the thing I'll say is I tried a Santa hat for a while.
Yeah,
it was too hot and itchy.
I could see it.
You don't want itchy on your head.
Yeah, you want your head to air out in the middle of the stream. Yes.
You need ventilation. It's important. That's why the antlers are good.
Only the herbiest of elves over here. Okay.
I thought about stapling them, but I thought that was a little too close to the Grinch, and I didn't want to. Yes. I don't want to have any tragedies.
Yeah.
What are we talking about this week?
What are we talking about? Well, you suggested it, man.
Well, look, it's the artifice of the podcast. Somebody has to ask. Then
you're the one that now has legitimate, honest to God, hands-on experience with 5G.
This is true. I have a phone that does the 5Gs now.
The 5th G has arrived.
Yeah. And contrary to public opinion, Bill Gates has not activated the Rona in me using my 5G phone.
No.
Let's see. The weather radar still works.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have cancer or autism, so I feel good on all those fronts.
And also, I'm sure your life is radically different because of how fast your phone's data transfer is now, right? It's completely different, right? It's a whole different.
Well, you might be surprised, Brad.
It must be a night and day difference.
So the biggest change is that my phone has a little tiny weird place on the side. I don't know if you can see it through the case. There's like a window on the side, and that's where the fast. Here's the thing: there's different 5Gs. There's more than one 5G.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So there's low band 5G, which operates in one spectrum that is the low end, from 600 to 850 megahertz.
Okay.
Depends.
Wait. Is there seriously a sub gigahertz segment of the 5G band? Really?
Yeah.
That's where
4G operates too. This is the one that's been around.
I was promised like 24 gigahertz.
Look. No. Gigabits. The gigahertz is just the wavelength, the frequency.
That's what I'm saying. I'm sitting here looking at weather forecasts at around 23.8 gigahertz, something like that. Anyway, we'll get to it.
Okay, yeah. So the low band, which is what everybody turned on pretty straight in a pretty straightforward way earlier this year, and in 2019, is basically like 4G++, right? Okay. So it's a little bit faster. It's not gigabit, so it's not going to run at 1,000 megabits per second. The theoretical max is around 80 to 250 for each cell. So that means everybody that's connected to the cell radio will share that bandwidth.
Okay. That really does sound like 4G, because I haven't done a honest to God speed test on my phone over cellular recently, but that sounds kind of in the ballpark of what I was getting already.
I would bet if you fired up your 4G phone speed test right now, you would get like 80 to 100 megabits where you live.
Yeah.
I typically see 50 to 80 megabits when I run a speed test if I'm out and about in Pacifica, when I'm on that kind of spectrum. And the nice thing about that is it works just like 4G. You have similar, the radio penetrates buildings. It has good range. So if you can see a tower someplace in a rural part of the country, you'll probably have signal. Assuming it's the right brand radio, assuming it's a Verizon radio for your Verizon phone or a Sprint radio for your Sprint, or T-Mobile radio for your T-Mobile phone, whatever.
Hey, can we just talk about the old EM for a second?
Yeah, the electromagnetic radiation.
The penetration is just because of the shape of the wave form, right? Is that correct?
It's about the frequency.
Wavelength, rather. Yes.
Wavelength.
Yes.
Wavelength and frequency
That's
are inextricably connected.
Yes. Well, they're the same thing, right?
Yeah,
effectively.
It's two different measures of the same thing, basically.
Right.
So,
and then what are the terms? Is short and long, I guess, are the ways to describe.
So low is long wavelength
is lower on the spectrum. Is that right? Like the lower the hertz, the longer the wavelength. Is that correct?
That seems.
I think that's right.
The lower the hertz, the higher the wavelength.
Okay.
Because it's the number of waves per second is what the hertz is measuring.
Okay.
So the longer the wave, the fewer waves there are per second.
Yeah.
So it's inverse.
The longer the wavelength.
I apologize in advance for this.
That's a lot. It's almost the end of the year, man. This year's been a lot.
I did not expect. I did not think about the actual math here. But the upshot is,
I'm just trying to conjure the image of the wavelength in people's heads. Like it's the longer the wavelength, the longer before you get to another curve up and down, right?
Well, so the upshot is there are certain wavelengths that penetrate wood and metal and concrete and the types of things that we build buildings with, glass, better than others. The 600 to 850 megahertz range has really, really good penetration for typical building supplies, which is why we've been using it for years and years and years. Okay. It's why we did TV in that range. Like early TV was in that same frequency spectrum, and it's because it'll go into your house, right?
Yeah. That's probably worth noting. That's like a much lower or longer wavelength than even like typical home Wi-Fi.
Yeah,
or going back a couple decades, even like your typical like off the shelf cordless phone, right?
It's in the same general range as the cordless phones were. Yeah.
Okay.
So that 900 megahertz unlicensed range, which I don't think is on, I think that might have changed recently. I haven't paid attention to it. That was the first place that cordless phones showed up because they were all analog and they needed a massive amount of spectrum to work. But they also had crazy, like my parents have a 900 megahertz phone that has ridiculous range still.
You might be talking about slightly older cordless phones than I am. I was thinking about the 2.4 gigahertz cordless phones.
The 900 megahertz ones came out in the mid 90s probably because I had one of those when I was in college, I think.
Okay.
And it like I lived in an apartment, like in one of those apartment complexes where college kids live. And there were probably 500 units in this apartment complex. And I could walk almost all the way across the apartment complex and still have my cordless phone more or less work.
Hey, remember cordless phones?
Cordless phones were good, man.
Hey, remember phones?
Yeah, I don't miss that.
Remember landlines? Do you guys still have a landline?
No. Well,
really?
No. Yeah, I pay for a number. I pay for our old number.
So do I. I can't unbundle it from my internet service, but I've never actually hooked a phone up to it. I probably should.
Why?
I don't know.
Power goes out, that'll go down too if it's hooked up to your internet.
Yeah, you're right.
So 600 to 850 megahertz low band is low band. So the other thing is the higher the wavelength, the more data you can pack into a smaller range of frequencies.
Okay.
So like the low band signals, because it's congested and there's a bazillion phones on that and other devices, your maximum channel width is like 100 megahertz. So that's why you don't get a massive amount of data in that space. Mid-band is 2.5 to 3.7 gigahertz. This is more limited in regions because that is a spectrum that is licensed differently. Like all of this is wildly dependent on the region that you're in, because like the US, the EU, India, China, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, African countries, everybody licenses different spectrums for different stuff. And some of these bands are just not available in certain regions. 2.5 to 3.7 gigahertz is much, much more less congested. You can do fatter channels. And as a result, you can get, and the density on each, per like megahertz of channel you have available is greater. So you can get 100 to 900 megabits per second. I have not seen, first off, iOS doesn't expose this stuff. I haven't seen any speed tests that indicate I'm connecting to these bands.
Oh, okay. So that's one of the questions I was going to ask after we get through these basics. But so yeah, you're on an iPhone 12, just to be clear. That's
iPhone 12
That
Pro.
is the handset that you are using to
try out. Yes, I'm not using one of the Samsung phones or any of that stuff.
So they do, in fact, actually expose which type of band you're connected to? Or
no, they do not. You have to infer it based on the performance that you're getting.
Oh, I thought you were saying that there would be an indicator.
I'm going to check and make sure, because we've had 4 or 5 iOS updates since I looked at this last.
What does it look like when does it just say 5G?
Just says 5G.
Okay. Just like what does it say? Does it say LTE? I've gotten so used to the iOS display, it doesn't register mentally anymore. Does it say?
Mine says 5G, and let's see, when I go into settings and I go to general, I should go to cellular.
It says LTE when you're on 4G, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
It does not tell me. Let me go look at about and make sure it's not there.
And you're on which network?
Verizon.
So
Verizon, it gives me my IMEI ID, but it doesn't give me any indication of what I'm connected to on the radio side.
Interesting.
So, I mean, that's what is more Apple than not telling you?
Yeah, that's true.
But I mean, it's annoying.
But the carrier's marketing has focused so much on 5G. I'm surprised they don't try to get it in your face a little more. Of course, on the other hand, once they lock you into your plan, what do they care about how loud you are?
That's a good point. But also, I don't understand the marketing choices behind that kind of stuff. The thing, it's weird to me. There is a setting in iOS that you need to flip that says allow more data. If you go into your cellular settings, if you have unlimited data and don't mind it chunking data out, you can mash the button that says allow more data on 5G. I may not have turned that on when I did the early testing on this stuff. I'm going to see what speed test I get right now. I had to wipe my phone a few weeks ago, and so my settings weren't. I just did a clean install.
Wait, do you restore backups from phone to phone typically?
Usually, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
No kidding. I gave that up a long time ago. It just feels more performant to start with a clean slate.
I have way too many two-factor things on my phone to feel comfortable doing that at this point.
That's fair.
So I'm getting like 23 megs down and 3 megs up inside the house.
Megabytes down?
Megabits per second.
Megabits?
Yeah, it's slow.
Yeah.
I'm in a shitty coverage area too.
Okay.
My house.
Also, maybe we'll get to that stuff. It's not like that's probably the actual kind of focal point of this topic, right? Is like what the coverage is like at long distances, because the deployment sounds like it's pretty fiddly.
So the trick with the midband is that it penetrates reasonably well. It doesn't seem to be deployed where I am. I don't know if that's a US Spectrum thing or if that's just a local Verizon in my neighborhood / the places I go during the pandemic thing. The third place that this is interesting is with the high band stuff. So high band is 25 to 39 gigahertz, which is 25,000 megahertz to 39,000 megahertz. And this is millimeter waves. So this is a different spectrum. It's closer to microwaves, I believe.
Huh. You're going to be cooking food with your phone at some point?
No, you're not going to be cooking food with your phone. That is what the crazy people say, but it is not. You cannot cook an egg with your millimeter wave radio.
I am being flip.
I know.
I have heard. I mean, the term millimeter wave has definitely become like a buzzword, right? Like that is showing up in marketing and a lot of headlines.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because like that high frequency gives you a massive theoretical maximum. So
yeah, I mean, like that is a damn high frequency. Like if you've listened to much of this podcast, or if you listen to the podcast at all, you probably already know that. But like home Wi-Fi, like fast ass home Wi-Fi, is still in the like 5 to just now getting into like the 6 gigahertz territory.
Well, yeah, and it's you're looking at like if you're looking at like the wireless PCI Express stuff, like the UWB stuff that like for the Vive for the wireless VR adapters and stuff like that, you're looking at like the same kind of ranges. Like those are, I think, 60 gigahertz.
Oh wow. Okay.
So the upside is you can get real fast performance up to theoretical maximums of like 10 gigabits for a cell, which is shared amongst all the users. But still, that's a shitload of bandwidth for the 10 people or 15 people that connect to a cell at any given moment.
Can I interrupt you real quick and get you to elaborate on exactly what constitutes a cell? Like, is that an antenna? Is that a physical thing on the tower, or like what how does that work exactly?
So it's a shared radio transmitter and receiver on the tower.
Okay, so it is the physical kind of antenna, sort of.
Often there's software now, but yeah, there's like a physical, there's a physical thing that connects, and then there'll be a chip that drives, and each of those chips can drive a certain number of connections, and each of those is a cell.
So that's the point, is that there is a hard limit on connections there.
Yeah, and so this is worth getting into too. There are different types, there are different scales of cell. So there are like megas. I think they have different labels for them. There's a metro cell, which is like if you like in San Francisco, we have Sutro Tower, which is a huge radio tower on top of the biggest hill in town. And it's where all the TV broadcasts, I'm sure there's like all sorts of wireless internet stuff off there. You would put a metro cell on a big area and give it like 20,000 milliwatts of power, right? They're really big. They cover a massive, massive area. And they're relatively low bandwidth. They'll use the lower band frequencies to give wide areas of coverage that are not particularly fast, right?
Okay.
To hundreds and hundreds of people at a time per cell. So like there'll be 500 radios on that tower, and each radio is capable of serving 250 or 300 people.
Interesting.
So you're looking at thousands to tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of people. Or if you're in a rural area, there'll be like one of those things, and there'll be 6 cells that all point in different directions, or 8 cells that all point in different directions. And those will serve, again, a couple of hundred people per cell.
And what do you know what tier of service those can reach? Like, are we talking like Edge and 3G, or is 4G on?
I think Edge and 3G. I think Edge is retired. 2G is retired now. Edge was 2G.
Right.
I think 3G is turned off in the US. I don't know. It depends on your region. Probably.
Oh, wow. Huh.
Yeah, I haven't seen 3G in ages.
I just assumed there were some like super rural areas that still hadn't gotten 4G deployment, but who knows?
Well, so what happens is usually those deployments get pushed even in rural areas because they want to reclaim the unused parts of the spectrum.
Oh.
So if there's frequency shifts, then like Verizon will have to get out of that spectrum so they can toss that back and get money back or license it out to somebody else.
Sure.
So that's what happened to the 2G stuff. And I think the 3G stuff went that way too, but I don't remember.
Okay.
In the US at least.
But to ask the question from the other direction, can 4G work on a metro cell? Like can it project from
absolutely
over that big an area? Like, because where we're getting to is that like the FUD you hear about 5G, like the real FUD, not the like it's going to turn you into a lizard alien, but the this is not all it's cracked up to be FUD is like that the range is incredibly short. It has to be deployed on like every street corner, block by block, to be effective. So that's why I'm asking, like 4G can cover a big area with a relatively small number of like tower deployments, right?
And 5G does that too. Like the 5G low band is exactly that. It's
okay.
For all intents and purposes, 5G low band is just 4G
with a little better.
That's a little bit better.
Okay.
It's you know when we talked about Wi-Fi 6 and like 802.11 AC, the new version of Wi-Fi versus the current version of Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess Wi-Fi 6 is the new. So it's AX versus AC if you care about the 802.11s, or 5 versus 6 if you pay attention to marketing. 6 is basically 5 plus some shit that makes the radios better for high density areas, right?
Right.
So like your neighborhood specifically, you'll probably see a benefit going from 5 to 6. My neighborhood, you have 50 APs within your house that you can hit. I have 10.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. You're looking at hundreds. I'm looking at 10 or 20.
The site survey in my router interface tops out at 100, and it hits that, and there seem to be more past that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I see 10 or 20 when I do a site survey.
Yeah.
And if I switch from Wi-Fi from AC to AX, I probably won't see much difference, but you will.
Right.
This is a similar situation. Like they're doing better housekeeping. We're better at running these kinds of radios. The frequencies have changed a little tiny bit.
Huh. Okay.
But more or less it's the same as 4G. And that's the baseline going forward. So the 4G stuff will eventually go away. The 5G stuff will replace it.
Okay.
You'll be able to keep your 4G phone for at least 5 years, probably more.
Okay, so this is new to me, hearing that low tier 5G is like actually good and usable and here now and stuff.
Yeah.
Because all you hear about is I guess it must be the millimeter wave stuff is just dominating all the coverage.
Well, I mean, the millimeter wave stuff is interesting because like Verizon is saying, hey, you can get gigabit internet on your phone, which is true, kind of. In reality, like, okay, I haven't been to downtown San Francisco during the pandemic, right?
At all?
Not at all.
Man, it's depressing. It's rough.
I mean, there's nobody there. There's no reason for me to go.
No, but I mean, that's why it's depressing. Like specifically seeing all those like stores and restaurants boarded up. It's just, it's like the economic impact really smacks you in the face when you go down there of just like, man, this is a lot of people out of work.
Should actually go look, except for we're supposed to stay home right now. So I'm not going to. But anyway, the upshot is the places that I've been, including some shopping, like outside Targets and shopping, like I've been to Serramonte Mall to do curbside pickups and stuff like that. I have yet to see, every time I stop and park the car someplace and wait for a package, I open up the phone and do a speed test. I have yet to see anything approaching 100 megabits on the real life testing.
Interesting. Okay.
Like I get 80 is pretty reliable at the like Colma and Daly City. I'm never seeing anything over 100.
Interesting. Okay.
So the high band, the 29 to 39 gigahertz is millimeter wave. And that right now, PC Mag did testing, pays for testing every year, and they do good wireless testing around the country. They saw 1.8 gigabits per second as the high speed on AT&T's 5G, actual 5G network.
Wait, hang on. Can you repeat that? Can you repeat that? Did you say 1.8
gigabits per second?
Really?
Yeah.
That's kind of crazy.
It's bonkers.
That's pretty fucking fast. Like, I thought I misheard you for a second.
No, but it's also not representative of.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Like,
and most of the 5G, this is the other gotcha. Most of the 5G low band right now is slightly slower on some networks than the 4G low band. Because the number of radios that are deployed for 5G versus the number of radios that are deployed for 4G right now is skewed probably in favor of the 4G. This is my theory. This isn't anything anybody's written, but they have to deploy the radios get shifted as the demand for the new spec shifts. So we'll see that change, but as it rolled out initially, probably not quite as fast as the existing 4G. Yeah. Not so much that you'll notice.
I mean, we have to be like mega early in the deployment, right? Like, because until the iPhone 12 came out, I didn't realize, and granted, I don't keep up with Android handsets very well, but like, I didn't realize that 5G was really commercially even available yet.
So the 5G stuff that was the early 5G chipsets were actively bad, is my understanding. Like the early Qualcomm chipset that was in the Android phones, the first 5G Android phones, drew an incredible amount of power and got really hot and killed your battery and didn't really show you a whole lot of performance benefit. So it was a real like, don't buy this device, right? They're better now. This always happens. The first couple of generations of the radios are almost always hinky, and then they get okay, and then they get good, and then you don't even think about them anymore for 5 years. And then they roll out a new standard, and we do the whole thing again.
Yeah.
The big problem with the millimeter wave stuff, and I think this is like, we talked about this when we talked about Stadia, and Google was saying, look, 5G is going to make game streaming possible, because like 5G inherently is good, right? Like they do. The latency's better, the throughput's better, but like for gaming, the latency is for a quarter what it is on 4G. So you're looking at like theoretical 8 to 12 milliseconds. Verizon reports early 5G is at like 30 milliseconds for stuff that uses normal internet.
Is that end-to-end latency, or is that just their addition to the latency?
That's over-the-air latency. So that's radio to radio.
Okay.
Like radio latency is high because you're doing shared cells, so they're time splitting all these radios.
Okay. So in other words, that doesn't take into account regular internet latency on top of that?
Yeah, they're saying that we can get this down to 10 or 20 milliseconds round trip by deploying servers at the data centers connected to the backhauls for the carriers.
Should I ask you to define the term backhaul, or should that just be obvious?
It's the connection.
Is that just the backbone types thing?
It's their connection to the main network rather than so basically what they're saying is that they want to. It's like, how CDN like Akamai works, where they just put data centers in all the ISP.
Yes.
Like they basically connect a data center to the ISP's network before, so it doesn't have to go out to the internet before you get like your YouTube videos or your Netflix videos.
Right.
Same thing.
Okay.
Okay. Well, hold on. I want to go back to, before we get back. I'm going to do this too. I know how I'm going to do this now. The problem with the millimeter wave stuff is it doesn't penetrate anything. There are like YouTube videos of people holding up a sheet of paper, putting it over the millimeter wave radio and watching the speeds go down.
I thought by anything you meant like concrete and metal and maybe brick and wood and other common construction materials, but not like water and paper.
Well, what does a microwave heat up in your oven, Brad? Does it heat up the food, or does it heat up the water in the food?
Yeah, the water, of course, but like
same thing.
Paper,
like the water blocks the water in your finger. If you put it over the window, is going to block the thing from working.
Paper don't got much water in it.
Well, that's true. I haven't been able to, like I said, I haven't been able to find any millimeter wave cell towers in places that I go.
Right.
So I don't know. I haven't gotten to repeat this. So it's a potentially apocryphal. I apologize for sharing this. I've seen multiple YouTube videos where people do this. This seems to me like the millimeter wave stuff is better for fixed installations. We'll get into that in a little bit. But like, for example, my parents who live in rural Virginia have a 4G. Their internet connection is a fixed 4G installation. So there's a 4G cell on a tower that they can see from a pole by their house. They put a fixed antenna that aims at that tower, and it's like a dedicated connection between the tower and their house. And it uses 4G cellular radios, but it doesn't connect to AT&T or Verizon or Sprint or something like that, like your phone hotspot does or your phone does. It's a private 4G network that only works for them and the people that subscribe to this
provider that
service.
specializes in. Yeah. Is that their only option, or is that just their best option?
That's it. It's that or satellite. Yeah.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah. So they don't have cell service there, so you can't even like use a hotspot or something.
How do you find it just day to day using it there?
It's
significantly noticeably different. I assume it would be at least a little more latent than your average, like not wired, hardline broadband.
It's worse than cable. It seems analogous to like good DSL.
Okay. Well.
Like I didn't do like you're able to watch Netflix. You're able to watch streamed videos. I was able to like browse my Google Photos library and do voice calls and stuff like that. But it was very much a situation where if like I had an important call that I had to make and it was a Zoom or something, I had to like get everybody else to not use the internet for that 20 minutes.
Yeah, that's a little troublesome.
But I mean, better than satellite. Holy shit. And way cheaper too.
You're going to live on the side of a mountain or in the middle of the woods or something. You got to make some trade-offs.
Well, and here's the thing is if this millimeter wave stuff works for those kinds of fixed installations, then during the times when there's not something blocking the radio waves, like rain or snow,
passing cloud.
Yeah, it's great, right? Yeah. It works really well. Even if like the 4G stuff even worked during rain and snow, like we were there when it was raining and snowing and it was fine. Like it wasn't, there was definitely a degradation in performance, but it wasn't like you can't use the internet or you can't take a phone call. It was like, oh, the streaming is like a little blockier than I would like maybe. So the way you get around this in like the upshot on this is that the microwave stuff is going to be really relevant, I think, for installations and maybe for urban installations. So like imagine you're walking to your office in San Francisco and you're on a corner on 2nd Street and Market, and like that's a really dense, high traffic area. There's a bazillion people walking there all the time. People are always on their phones. You'll probably have really, really dope internet on like corners like that.
Okay, so like this is kind of answering the question I haven't asked yet, which is that the conception that's forming in my mind of this millimeter wave stuff is that it sounds like it has both the upsides and the downsides of Wi-Fi.
Pretty much.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
So given that is apparently the case, like, is that really
Wi-Fi
the big
penetrates though?
Well, to some degree, yes. But so does that really just make the big benefit of the millimeter wave stuff that you're essentially going to get Wi-Fi like service without having to bother like hunting down an access point and authenticating with it in a public space or whatever? It's like instead of trying to get on this place's Wi-Fi hotspot that's probably faster than my phone, my phone provider, Verizon or whoever, probably just has whatever the equivalent. What is the local equivalent? What is the like block by block equivalent of a metro cell? Like they probably have some of those up, and I'm just going to enjoy Wi-Fi like performance without having to hunt down Wi-Fi because it's just my cell phone, right?
So there absolutely are. You probably don't notice the block by block equivalents because they usually disguise them in the building facades and stuff like that.
Yeah. I didn't mean you would see them or anything like that, but
they're there. Yeah. So like if you look at busy corners, they use these things called microcells, and they're either built into like the corners of buildings or the facades, or they're on light poles or bus power poles or something like that. They're around. They're the part of the background noise of our urban environments. We don't notice them anymore, but those serve up to a couple hundred users per cell.
Okay.
They'll provide much higher speeds. They cover a few hundred square meters, like a radius of a few hundred meters in the direction that they point. So you're literally looking at like a half a city block, and you put them on every corner and it works itself out.
Do you have any idea how the handoff technology works with those things? Because I can't imagine like what mechanics are going on when you're like on the bus or even driving or whatever, like, to bounce from one to the next of those rapidly in succession, like, especially maybe streaming a video or something like that. Like it's kind of amazing to me that they are actually able to hand that connection off that fast.
Well, so it depends on the version of the spec, and it used to depend on the provider. I think it's unified now across all the providers, because like in the old CDMA GSM days, the CDMA phones were able to do the handoff a lot better because the GSM phones the GSM phones assume that you're always going to connect, so there's no confirmation phase, and the CDMA stuff waits until the confirmation that you've connected to the next cell pops before you disconnect from the old one.
God, I forgot about the days where you had to care about whether you had a CDMA or a GSM phone.
Backwards when I think about it. I can't.
Yeah,
I think GSM did it badly and CDMA did it well.
Okay.
I don't know how 4G does the handoff, and I definitely haven't looked at how 5G does the handoff. I know that I haven't had that, hey, you missed a handoff and your call disconnected thing happen in years.
Right.
I also don't really use the phone in the car anymore.
Well, sure. There's that.
Yeah. The video stuff is easier because the network protocols will handle that.
Yeah.
Like your video player will buffer and you'll have like 3 seconds of extra video.
Of course. There's a lot of resilience there, of course.
Yeah. That's actually also why, like if you're watching Twitch on a mobile device, then you often will have way more latency on a live stream, even with the mobile version, than you do on like a home wired browser or something like that.
Sure.
So microcells cover like urban areas. There's also these things called picocells that are for much smaller areas, a few hundred meters. Tens of meters, that are used in like train stations and shopping malls and interior installations. So those fill in the additional gaps. And the way this works is like the phone providers actually go out and they survey the entire city, either by placing radios on cabs or buses or people or whatever, or collecting data from your phone, your GPS enabled phones to tell you when the signal drops, and they go out and they put a new radio there to fill in those holes.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So that's kind of it. That's the big thing. Like, I wouldn't get super excited about the millimeter wave radio, even though your phone has a new little window in it that's supposed to let the special radio waves in.
What is that window? Is it glass, or what does it look like?
I assume it's glass. It's just like a little different colored thing on the side of the phone. Like here, I'll pull the case down so you can see, but it's like,
it's very blurry. It's hard to.
Yeah, I don't know.
Just kind of a big shiny mess.
I'll take a picture of it, and we can use that as the photo for the.
But I mean, I guess the other half of the point I was trying to make about like the millimeter wave 5G is basically just Wi-Fi except cell. Is that like, you tell me, was it always unrealistic to expect? Like, I guess let me rephrase this. What I expected when I heard 5G was on the way was like, oh, it'll be Wi-Fi like performance at distance, at scale, like 4G was. It's like, oh, 4G is just way faster cell, but you still get the benefits of like.
Well, I mean, it is just in really specific circumstances that no one's going to see in real life.
Right. Well, that's what I mean is like, we're not going to get the wide scale rollout like we did with 4G, where same range on transmitters and stuff like that, but way faster. Right. Like there are going to be inherent limitations to the super fast 5G that sound like they're just physics related. Right.
I mean, yeah, the TLDR on the 5G stuff is that 4G is really good. And like, it is definitely not a 3G to 4G situation.
That's where what I'm getting at. Yes.
You go from like mobile internet being kind of shitty, but working okay.
Right.
To like, oh, actually now my phone does work while I'm at PAX. Right. Yes. Remember when we used to go to PAX and our phones wouldn't work for 3 days?
Yep.
Yeah. I switched to Verizon to fix that.
No. Yep.
But yeah, so like we're in a situation where this stuff is becoming more mature. There's other parts of the spec that we didn't talk about that are kind of interesting about different standards for different types of uses. One of them, the enhanced mobile broadband, is what we're talking about with like phones, obviously. Ultra reliable low latency is for things that are robust, like emergency services. I assume that this is what like a modern pager equivalent will connect to, or medical devices, stuff like that. Things that you want to have constant uptime and uninterrupted data. And then like Internet of Things applications also apply here for devices that are more that need to be connected to a wide area network and not a local network. Okay. And some of those applications are like, that's not like people always suggest autonomous cars in that, but that's not really what you're thinking about. You're thinking more about like weather sensors and drones that you provide Wi-Fi to firefighters for, or that you use as repeaters for 5G signal to come in to disaster areas, stuff like that.
Critical infrastructure type stuff.
Critical infrastructure is exactly it. And that would be limited to first responders and
that's cool.
And people like that. Yeah.
That's neat. started to ask, I mean, I don't know if are we at the just Brad asks random questions that came to mind
go
phase.
for it, man.
I mean, I started to ask is there going to be a 6G? Like, is there anywhere else in the spectrum to go from here? But then I just happened to pull up the radio frequency Wikipedia page.
Yeah.
Which apparently tops out at 300 gigahertz. So I don't know how much more of that spectrum is accessible by telecom companies, but.
Well, when you get up into those high frequencies, you end up like cooking things.
Yeah. So maybe that actually segues into the controversies and concerns segment of this, which is that one of the genuine concerns is the weather prediction, weather forecast stuff.
Yeah. Well, okay. First off, I was told by the president that America is leading in the 6G race.
Okay. We're there already. Let's just increment the number by one. It's very impressive when you just say this thing is bigger than that other thing. People love it.
So just to be clear, I wanted to make sure I get this right because I kind of messed it up earlier on. Microwaves range from 300 megahertz to 300 gigahertz. It's this entire range, right?
Okay.
Everything we're talking about here, everything from 300 megahertz on. The bands where we cook are in the 2.4 gigahertz range, and they're really high power compared to what we're using in phones.
Okay.
So like we're talking about milliwatts for phones, and you're talking about like 800 watts on a 800 watts on a commercial microwave oven usually.
Okay.
So anyway,
right.
but okay. So your question was about, I answered a question that you didn't ask.
I started to ask a bunch of more EM questions that we probably should either dedicate an entire episode to or get a physicist on here to talk about.
We could totally get a physicist on to talk about brain ionization.
I am super fascinated by that entire topic.
Yeah. So the TLDR is that at this point we've had enough longitudinal studies about EM radiation affecting humans.
Oh yeah, I'm not worried about that stuff.
No, but I just want to say it because like we are confident that you are fine. Like this stuff is not causing lasting damage to people. It doesn't cause autism
in the radio frequency specifically, which is
these
what
are
we
radio
use
frequencies. All these frequencies are radio frequencies.
Well, you were talking about here is a potentially ignorant question: is microwave just part of the radio frequency?
So the entire EM spectrum from X-rays to microwaves, it's all the same stuff. It's just
I know that. What I'm saying is like RF is a specific range, right?
Yeah.
And I thought microwave was a distinctive range from RF. Is RF inclusive of microwave?
Yes.
Should I be asking these questions on this podcast?
I'm making one is a superset of the other, and I can't remember which is which.
Okay, so that's what I was trying to establish. I didn't realize that. I thought they were totally separate, exclusive. I thought they were mutually exclusive segments of the EM band.
The segments that we learned in middle school or high school or wherever we learned that stuff in science class is non-definitive, I would say.
Okay.
It's a construct rather than a definition.
I see.
Does that make sense?
Well, okay. I mean, I could just look at the numbers, right? I apologize to everyone listening to this podcast. Radio frequency is from 20 kilohertz to 300 gigahertz.
Yeah.
Microwave is from 300 megahertz to 300 gigahertz. So it has to be part of the RF spectrum then.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's all part of the EM spectrum. The radio spectrum is I know that. I just thought that microwave was entirely separate from RF, which apparently is not the case. No. These are all just the same thing. These are all the same photons, just at different frequencies and wavelengths and energies, I guess. So yeah, it's fine. You're not going to hurt anything. Yeah. The 5G is not activating the COVID that Bill Gates and Elon Musk have distributed around the world using. Bill Gates and Tim Apple have distributed around the world using their technology.
The details are very important.
Yeah, I got to get this right. The chemtrails are not real, even though we've joked about them for years.
Make sure you don't fudge any minor detail, any of the minutia of this extremely specific and well-tested theory.
The millimeter wave radios interfering with Doppler radar, what is actually a real thing because they do work in the same kind of frequency ranges.
Yeah, that's what I was starting to touch on earlier. What is it? The water in the atmosphere is reactive at around 24 gigahertz, I believe. 23.
Well, the water reacts at a bunch of different frequencies, but the Doppler radar that we use in the US uses 24 gigahertz. Yeah. The upshot is that the FCC and NOAA and I think NASA got together and it seems like it's shocking, but there isn't really reliable data coming out of the FAA or FCC these days. Yeah,
I tried to find a definitive answer to this, and it was tough to track down.
Yeah, no, it's the home of FUD. It seems like they all agreed to not allow the spectrum that overlaps, the part of the spectrum that overlaps with Doppler radar in the US. So our 5G suffers a little bit in a way that probably doesn't affect any actual human beings. And the Doppler weather radar, which saves probably thousands of lives a year, remains unaffected.
I hope you're right about that. I can't say for sure. The best I could find was a story from May saying that the FCC had in fact approved a plan from Legato Networks.
Okay.
But I couldn't figure out exactly what the plan is, I'm literally on this site trying to figure out what their plan entailed.
Okay.
There were some quotes from Ajit Pai, the head of the FCC, kind of like shitting on what the NOAA and NASA had to say about their concerns, saying that he trusted their experts and that he thought everything would be fine. So I'm not.
The current administration seems to trust business instead of scientists.
That's the upshot of what I was getting from that. I'm not 100% convinced that we're out of the woods here. I do have some actual real detail about this, though, from a story in Wired from about a year and a half ago.
Okay.
Where they talked to some people at the NOAA about this stuff.
Oh, I like that.
This came out of some hearings that happened in Congress. But the acting chief of the NOAA at that time, I was kind of surprised they were able to quantify this stuff to this degree. I'll quote from this. Said that interference from 5G wireless phones could reduce the accuracy of weather forecasts by 30%. That's equivalent, he said, to the quality of weather predictions 4 decades ago.
Well, that sounds great.
Yeah, and skimming down a little further, they actually give some more context to that. That reduction would give coastal residents 2 or 3 fewer days to prepare for a hurricane, for example. It could lead to incorrect predictions of the storm's final path to land.
Well, I mean, the good news is we can always Sharpie a new path onto the map that they print, so it'll probably work itself out, right?
Fair point, I suppose.
I mean, look, 2 or 3 days worth of predictions is billions of dollars of property loss, human life lost. Like, it seems like we should not do that. I don't know. He
said we can't move away from 23.8 gigahertz, or we would. But that is the. I'll quote again. That's because water vapor emits a faint signal in the atmosphere at a frequency of 23.8 gigahertz. That is extremely close to the one sold for 5G wireless communications at 24 gigahertz.
Yeah.
And here's the last thing I'll mention about this, which I thought was super interesting. I'll just read this last paragraph here.
Is this in the same article?
Yes. In the meantime, Girth, that's the NOAA official, says this issue probably won't go away anytime soon. The FCC plans future 5G auctions for the radio frequency bands near ones used to detect rain and snow at 36 to 37 gigahertz, atmospheric temperature at 50.2 to 50.4 gigahertz, and clouds and ice at 80 to 90 gigahertz. This is not one and done, Girth added. Today it's 23.8, tomorrow it's 36. So
look, if the weather wants to be measured accurately, it needs to fucking pony up at the auction spread. That's how capitalism works.
They should just pay for their at the Spectrum auction, just like everybody else.
Let the clouds pay, man. That's what I say. The clouds got all those computers. They can pay for the radio that they need.
Damn cheapskate cumulonimbus.
Yeah. I hate a Cirrus. They're so lazy.
Yeah, but it was interesting to see all this stuff quantified and also like kind of gloomy to realize this is going to be an ongoing problem for a while.
Hey, when the good news is when you're home for the holiday, actually don't go home for the holidays, but if you're home, if you're talking to relatives at the holidays and they're like, well, elections don't matter, you can explain to them that the shitty weather forecasts they'll get in the future will be because they voted for the wrong asshole.
Yeah, let them know.
That's all I'm going to say.
Hey, remember how the weather forecast was in the 80s?
Welcome back.
Yeah.
The guy who did the weather in the 80s in Bristol had the weirdest haircut of all time.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it made his head kind of mushroom shaped. It was like down on the sides and then it curved back in around his ears, but you couldn't see his ears. It was It's a strange haircut.
Do you remember his name by any chance? Oh, because I want to see it now.
Man, he was on Channel 11, which was the CBS. WJHL was the
do some offline research.
Yeah, we can dig into this.
Yeah.
I think that's, unless you feel like you have more hot questions about.
I think that's a pretty good primer.
Like, so well, actually, we should talk about what this means if you're buying a phone. It probably doesn't matter.
Okay. That's pretty short and to the point.
Like, if you keep your phone for less than 5 or 10 years, you're going to be fine getting a 4G phone right now.
Yeah.
I think that
actually, it just occurred to me that I am totally in this exact position and hadn't really thought about that. I was thinking about upgrading to either an iPhone SE or a 12.
Well, so I think that from my experience, 4G is fine for most of the stuff that I do.
About, especially for my use case for a phone and mobile data, I have no complaints with 4G.
Yeah, the things that, like, the other things that a new phone will give you are going to be much more impactful, like a new camera or faster Face ID or better thumbs or whatever it is.
That all goes without saying. But I mean, the one thing you pointed out that I hadn't considered is that 4G support will literally go away at some point. But it sounds like that is a good long way off.
It'll be a while. You have time.
Okay.
Yeah. I wouldn't, like, if you'd asked me this last year and you were an Android customer, I would have probably recommended against buying a 5G phone because the Android chipsets were bad. I think now they're probably fine. Looking at the reviews of the 5G, the current crop, this year's crop of 5G Android phones, I think you're probably fine. The iPhone, I haven't noticed bad battery life or anything like that. It doesn't get hot when I'm on the 5G radio. Yeah. I haven't gotten the millimeter wave yet stuff. They didn't set it so you can turn it off if you don't want to use it. So I think we're probably okay.
Yeah.
But like, if you have a perfectly good 4G phone that you're happy with and you don't feel a need to upgrade for other stuff, I would not go upgrade it just to get on the 5G.
Yes. That's the bigger point here, right? 5G is absolutely not something to go running out the door trying to acquire.
Exactly. But yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah, I got a better understanding of this stuff. Like I said, the millimeter wave, the doesn't penetrate anything, the doesn't go further than like 2 city blocks stuff is like all I had ever heard about 5G. So it's nice to know that there is more to it and that some of it is actually okay.
Yeah, like it seems like at worst, it's as good as the status quo. I mean, maybe not right at this moment, but it will be as they shift radios from 4G to 5G.
Yeah,
shift cells from 4G to 5G.
Yes.
As always, this is the part of the show where we thank the people who make the show possible, our wonderful patrons over at patreon.com/techpod.
Big thanks to them, and also thanks to everyone else who listens and puts up with us fumbling our way through our spotty, incomplete understanding of the electromagnetic spectrum.
Look, this is we said it on the Patreon episode. November, it turns out, is the worst month of the year for both of our day job situations because we were both just absolutely swamped over the last 4 weeks.
Oh boy, yeah.
I think I'm excited about December just because it's back to normal-ish, at least for a little bit. And yeah, we do appreciate you all bearing with us. And thanks to everybody. We get such good tweets. I've been trying to retweet them when I see them. Either asking questions about the show or sharing what you like about the show or sharing what you don't like about the show. And we appreciate all of those. Letting your friends who are into this kind of stuff know about what we do is definitely appreciated.
You know what my favorite EM fact is?
Yeah, I'd love an EM fact.
You want to hear one? Welcome to EM Facts.
It's our new podcast.
That's right. The visible spectrum is made up of, the 7 primary Roy G. Biv, right?
Yeah.
The colors starts with red, ends with violet.
Yeah.
What is the spectrum before the visible spectrum?
The red end or the blue end?
Yeah, the before the red end.
Infrared.
Infrared. What comes after the violet?
Ultraviolet.
Whoa.
What?
Close. That's close.
Ultraviolet.
Yes.
Yeah.
Isn't that cool?
What's after ultraviolet, though?
Isn't that cool? Is it X-ray?
Yeah.
I think it's X-ray and then gamma, right?
Yeah. So if you go too purple, you turn into the Hulk.
That's right.
And if you go too red, you get cooked.
Yeah. The gamma's it, right? That's it.
That's it.
You're in supernova territory at that point.
the wavelengths are very small. Gamma rays are what they use to carve very low process size chips now, is my understanding.
Really?
Or at least that's what we're working toward.
Nanoscale lithography, is that what we're...
Yeah, nanometer size.
Wow, that's crazy.
Cuts in the chips.
That came up. I know we need to end this podcast, but that came up on another podcast I was on yesterday.
Wait, you do another podcast? Are you cheating on me?
No. It was just a one and done guest spot, I promise.
God.
It was about the likelihood of refresh consoles off this new cycle, like they did the PS4 Pro and
like
the
a process size shrink or whatever, yeah.
I didn't get into that territory, but I almost brought that up. Like, I don't think there's a lot of headroom to die shrink, and or even setting aside like a Pro, like a faster model, like that was typically what would precipitate the, there was the fat ugly PS3, and then there was like the PS3 Slim, which is smaller, and then there was like the PS3 Tiny at the end of the generation, And like if you go read about those models, like every one of those, like the main chip in the system went through like a pretty significant die shrink. But these things are already 7 nanometer, and like maybe they could go to 5 at some point in the next 5-7 years or whatever. But like, I don't know if we're going to see that cycle so much anymore.
Well, I mean, they use the chiplet stuff though, so presumably there's opportunity to optimize the design of those chiplets based on things that they learn from actual practice.
That's fair. That's a good point. Yeah.
Like if you look at the Xbox 360 and PS3, it is interesting because they kept combining, like those weren't system on a chips. Those were systems on a board, and there were a bunch of chips that made the thing work.
Yes.
And then by the end of the 360, they just jammed everything into one big giant die pretty much, I think.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a good point.
I don't know. I'm interested to see.
Yeah.
It's there will be things. The thing is, even though they can't do die shrinks, they can still add more pipelines and add more like raster and compute and shader pipelines.
Yeah.
So like there's still, I think we've reached a point where we're not going to see performance increases in general from shrinking process sizes for very much longer.
That's what I was getting at. Like,
we're going to see by going more parallel.
Totally. They can absolutely scale out performance. I was thinking more just like, this was more in the like kind of thermal, like the TDP territory of like, are we going to see a PS5 Slim if they can't exactly shrink the current SoC down much?
No, we're going to see the next PS5 is going to be PS5 thick with two C's.
That's what I'm saying.
Where like the cooler is even bigger.
Like, how are they going to make a smaller PS5 if they can't shrink that chip down?
Look, here's how you do it. You get a bucket, a drywall mud bucket, and you put 2 hoses into it, and you connect those hoses to the PS5, and that thing is your heat reservoir. And when it starts boiling, you have to go change the water.
That sounds like some solid engineering to me.
Yeah, I mean, that thing will never overheat. It'll be great. But yeah, thanks. We were thanking our patrons, Brad.
Sorry.
Thank you all for supporting the show. If you want to support the show and join the fabulous TechPod Discord, which is full of beautiful nerds just like you. Look, I hate calling people out individually, but
yes,
that's the guy we talked about on the Patreon episode, his nemesis from college.
Oh, I just saw that right before we started recording. I just happened to glance in there and landed. I was scrolling around looking to see if he ever elaborated on why that was. Did he? I
didn't want to ask. I was afraid to ask. I felt bad.
I hope that was
now I brought it up and it's even worse.
I hope that was like a jovial nemesis, like kind of like, a good-natured rivalry sort of situation and not something truly bad.
I really hope so.
Perhaps they were just professional rivals and there was some kind of, some friendly professional one-upsmanship going on. Let's hope that that's the case. The other thing that was cool was this morning we had a conversation about the weather forecasts on the different, like how AccuWeather is kind of bad now, and they've gone to for-profit weather forecasting. And somebody recommended I'm not going to say what it was because I don't want to out anybody, but like they recommended a site. They're like, oh yeah, I actually work on that. I'm glad you guys like that. That's really cool. Yeah. And that was a delight. So it is such a wonderful group of nerds. We're getting new people in every day with like just such a wide range of interests and expertise. It is a delightful place to hang out. You can join for $2 a month if you sign up for the Patreon. Yep.
And we appreciate everybody, whether you're sharing the word about the show or chatting in the Discord or whatever. It's great to have you.
Absolutely.
But extra special thanks, as always, to our executive producer level patrons, Jacob Chappell, Andrew Cotton, David Allen, and James Kamek, who we appreciate all of y'all and hope you enjoy what we do. You can find out more about the Patreon at patreon.com/techpod.
That's right.
Brad?
Yes.
You looked like you had something to say there.
I don't know. I probably did. It's gone.
Just
now.
walking away.
Yep.
I think you should get a flat Christmas tree to go on your headphones.
You think so? Wait, what?
I think you should get like a felt Christmas tree that just
felt. Okay, yeah, like that sounds a little top heavy to me. I don't know.
Yeah, it shouldn't be round. It should be flat.
I mean, I'm angry that you already took the best idea in the antlers, and I've got to come up with some. There's nothing is going to be either as good as that or as easy to find as that, because
they're so sparkly.
The antler headband makes perfect sense, but like, what else is there in that category?
Look,
I don't know.
You could do the Christmas tree, and then you could put some lights. You could like wire up some LEDs on there and have them twinkle.
Yes, that idea has already been proposed in this household, unfortunately, in the last hour. So
I can't do green because of the green screen.
Oh,
so the tree's out for me.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. It does seem like this is going to end with me wearing a battery pack for a while.
I like this. I like where this is going.
Yeah, good stuff.
Okay, we'll see you all next week. Thanks for listening, everybody. Hope your holiday season is starting well. And oh, hey, just as a fair warning, shipping times are getting real bad. So if you're trying to order stuff for Christmas, this is the week to do it. It seems like,
jeez, man,
things are hairy.
Dude, it's the 5th of December. I need like another 15 days.
Look, it's now's the time, and then you can just sit back and drink your eggnog after this, which the noggining is coming.
Oh God, are you guys doing that? Oh my God.
Oh hell yeah.
Last year was the first year you gave us any of that eggnog, and I like stretched it out as long as I possibly could.
Yeah.
I was like, maybe I could add a little water to this and just kind of thin it out.
You put bourbon in there, man.
I did not. Well, no, I did that. I'm just saying, like, okay. Because it was very good, is what I'm saying. I didn't want it to end. I was trying to make it last as long as humanly possible. It was incredible eggnog.
When I was putting out I'll post the recipe on the Meatloaf Cult so people can find it. When I was putting Christmas lights up last weekend on the house, the neighbors started doing the casual, "Hey, you guys doing the eggnog again this year?" And I was like, "Yeah, I do not plan. I wasn't planning on it, but I guess I am now."
The nog is that good. The shame goes out the window. You do whatever you can, whatever you have to do at that point.
Anyway, see you all next week. Bye, everybody.